Thank you very much. I now go back to my role as president, and I give the floor to the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you, President. So, the Security Council is meeting again to adopt a draft resolution for the resumption of the cross-border mechanism for humanitarian aid. There is no doubt that the permanent missions of Russia and China, as well as other missions, made major efforts to bring to light important aspects that serve to illuminate the humanitarian situation in accordance with the guiding principles for humanitarian assistance in emergency situations and the efforts of Syria to respond to COVID-19 and the effects of the pandemic of life on Syria, as well as lifting unilateral coercive measures and reaffirming that humanitarian action is broader than simply responding to the emergency needs of affected populations. It must also include support for basic services such as water, sewage, education, shelter, and early childhood education. This is the proper atmosphere for the dignified return of refugees to their homes. Western states, however, have obstinately ignored these major aspects and have focused on the cross-border mechanism in order to serve their needs, without any regard for the suffering of the Syrian people and with no regard for the sovereignty of the Syrian state or the suffering of its people. My delegation believes that the exaggerations in describing this mechanism as a lifeline for the Syrian people is a fallacy. It plays with the sentiment of public opinion. It is emotional blackmail, turning also propaganda spread around Bab el-Hawa shows the selectivity of these states and how they ignore the suffering of the Syrian people, which will not bow to unilateral coercive measures, as well as the deprivation of water as a weapon against civilians, along with the looting of Syrian wealth. My delegation reaffirms its principled position, rejecting these politicized mechanisms, which are flagrant violations of the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence of Syria. The lack of credibility, of transparency, and professionalism in the distribution of humanitarian assistance and the failure of directing this need to those who really are crying out for it rather than terrorist groups means that this mechanism guarantees the Turkish government financial gains and support for terrorist groups which are on the terrorist list of the United Nations. In conclusion, my delegation reaffirms that it will spare no effort to respond to the humanitarian needs and provide support to those who truly need it in order to alleviate the negative effects of the terrorist law war imposed on Syria. We will facilitate assistance to agencies of the United Nations and national and international partners in order to ensure that assistance reaches all those who need it across the entire territory of the Syrian Arab Republic. Improving the humanitarian situation calls for a positive commitment and engagement with the Syrian government based on the sites of humanitarian assistance based in Damascus and drawing away from the imposition of unlawful sanctions. The penholders did not consult us before presenting the draft resolution, which means that they were hiding their positions. And this shows a lack of responsibility as penholders and members of this council. Thank you very much. I thank the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic for his statement.